Hello viewers, good evening. Welcome back to my channel Literati. I will continue with my lectures on the Wasteland. Till now, we have completed, or rather we have journeyed through the first two parts of this modern day epic by T.S.Eliot, The Wasteland. We have seen the landscape as it unfolds in the first part, the burial of the dead, and the second part, a game of chess. We have witnessed the density and the complexities of the themes as they merge, as they expand, as the poet expresses himself in various personas, in various voices, sometimes assuming his own self, sometimes the voices seem nameless, coming from different directions, meandering, sometimes going back to the land of the myths, and then suddenly coming back to the present day scenario, sometimes traveling back in time to the biblical age or to the world of legends, to the world of classical wisdom, Shakespearean drama, images, ideas, themes, concepts, people, events coming together, creating a sort of a whirling and a chaotic and an ever-changing landscape. We have seen the previous part, a game of chess, and with a cacophony of voices, of all voices of women, in the modern day, present day scenario, the 20th century world, voices with names, all saying goodbye or bidding goodbye to each other. And that is how that part ends, which I feel is a very woman-centric part, because it begins with the image of a woman sitting in great regal splendor. Then it changes into the legend of Philomel, again transporting us to a world of neurosis, emptiness, boredom, despair, expressed in voices which seem to be nameless, which seem to come from different directions, and which express the monotony of life. And finally, it expands in the last stanza in a modern day pub of a lower class setting, the age of the early 20th century, the decades succeeding World War I. The reference is very apt. And we witness an exchange which highlights the solid quality of life. And like I said, this part ends in a chorus of voices, all saying goodbye, and voices which have names of women. Now, the third part is the fire sermon. In the fire sermon, the poet adopts, or the narration is in the voice of a mythical creature called T.S.Eliot. T.S.Eliot is an image from the world of classical literature. T.S.Eliot appears in Oedipus and Antigone, both by Greek classics, by Sophocles. T.S.Eliot is an image which exemplifies many ideas. For one, T.S.Eliot is a blind prophet of Apollo, the temple of Apollo in Thebes. Like I said, this image is from Oedipus, the king, and Antigone, both are Greek classical plays by Sophocles. He is, or T.S.Eliot, is neither he nor she. T.S.Eliot is a man who also adopts, or who lives the life of a woman for 7 years. T.S.Eliot is a soothsayer, T.S.Eliot is a clairvoyant, T.S.Eliot is a prophet. T.S.Eliot has been gifted with a longevity. T.S.Eliot is a witness to centuries of human history of racial memory. T.S.Eliot has an universal vantage point of the past, the present, and the T.S.Eliot being a prophet can visualize the future. T.S.Eliot is neither man nor woman. T.S.Eliot has been transformed into a woman, and in the modern day gender studies, the persona or the character or the image of T.S.Eliot has often been an object of psychoanalytical analysis and also studies in gender equations and gender relationships and gender identities. So T.S.Eliot has a racial memory, and in this part, the fire sermon, again the title is significant. Sermon refers to an edifying speech, a moral speech, a speech which is full of ethical ideas. And one thing more, this particular part, which is the third part of this 5-part epic, is also the longest in this magnum opus, The Wasteland. Altogether, it is composed of, or it has 137 lines, and like in the other parts of The Wasteland, this part also takes us to different places and makes us a spectator of something which has been a part of human history in the past, something which is a part of the modern day world, and something which can happen in the future or which continues in the future. T.S.Eliot is the omnipotent narrator and spectator, and we hear the voice of T.S.Eliot all through. T.S.Eliot looks at the past and compares it with the present, and T.S.Eliot laments on the erosion of the human values, the quality of life, the human experience, and the degeneration of human emotions. T.S.Eliot's voice is a voice of mourning, and he is a symbol of an enlightened wisdom, having a great longevity, a witness to centuries of human history. Here we might say that in many cultures, in many literatures, in belief systems, we have the persona or the personage or the image of someone who is ageless, someone who has a great wisdom because of ancient age. We can take the names of Methuselah, we can take the name from Mahabharata of Bhishma Pitama, who is also a witness to generations of strife and experience and evolution and conflict in Mahabharata. So the fire sermon opens, or it again has a construction which is not uniform, because we have long stanzas, and then in the last part the construction is of uneven lines, broken and disjointed. The first part is full of an immense condensed emotion and expression. The first stanza, which is T.S.Eliot who is speaking, is the voice is one of mourning, of lamentation, of grief, and the first long stanza expresses the fact: the river's tent is broken, summer is over. The river is the river Thames. Summer is over. Autumn and winter are coming. The remnants of summer are visible in the heap of the garbage which has been left behind. It is again just rubbish. The vestiges are those of empty cigarette butts, empty bottles, crumpled handkerchiefs, sandwich papers, cigarette ends, and, as the voice says, other testimony of summer nights. What is significant here is the representation or the mention of cardboard boxes, which refers to contraceptives. These are the testimonies of the summer nights, of the flings, of the affairs, of the immoral relationships, which were temporary, which were transient, which were not lasting, which were just meaningless relationships, leaving no lasting having no lasting permanence, leaving no lasting impression behind. Just emptiness. They are not over when the summer is over. The nymphs have departed. The nymphs here again refer to those beautiful mythical creatures. But in the modern day, there is no beauty, there's no romance. Whatever is the relationship between a man and a woman translates to these temporary flings, these sexual relationships which translate into nothing. The use of birth control, which is a denial of life, a denial of fertility. And with the passage of summer, what remains is this heap of garbage, these remnants. The romance has gone, the landscape is empty, the river moves slowly, there is an air of desolation. The banks of the river are full of mud. And what has happened in summer was brief, it was passing, and the loitering heirs, the playboys, those young men who were supposed to be the upholders of morality, have indulged in their pleasure, and they have also departed and left no addresses. So with summer, everything is over, and now there is this empty and desolate scene. And as T.S.Eliot says, the nymphs are departed. There is no longer any beauty. And they have left no addresses. So this vulgarity, this lewdness, this lecherous relationships, this immorality, it was not something beautiful. It was something which was again pointed to the debasement of the human race. The city, the young men, the rich young men, playboys, the heirs of the city directors have left no addresses. So everything is over once the summer is over. And the river Thames moves sluggishly. T.S.Eliot says, I who have been a witness to the past by the rivers of Leman in the ancient past, where I had seen the beauty and the aesthetics of life, I sat down and I wept. I wept to see this degeneration and this debasement and this abject immorality, this vulgarity, this lack of beauty, this lack of meaning, this lack of aesthetics, this lack of any moral values in the modern day life. Sweet Thames, run softly, for I speak not loud nor long. And T.S.Eliot says, Thames, move on slowly, because I will not lament forever, because I remember that ancient past by the waters of Leman. Again, that ancient time, that time space, that landscapes merges into the modern one, and T.S.Eliot, the omnipotent narrator and the spectator, speaks from memory and laments at the present. So this is a picture of grief. And then an awareness of mortality. At my back, in a cold blast, I hear the rattle of the bones and chuckle spread from ear to ear. That image of death. The death is not only physical, but it is a moral death, it is a spiritual death, it is a death of emotions, it is a death of values, it is a death in life. Because with the passing of summer, everything which had happened has gone away, and the only remnants are these vestiges of what has happened in the summer nights, the cigarette ends, the silk handkerchiefs, the cardboard boxes, the empty bottles, signifying the waste of life. Because this loitering is the playboys, the careless youth who care for nothing in life, no permanence. There is no permanence in human relationships. They have departed and they have left no addresses, with no desire to rekindle the relationships, which for them was just a passing phase. It was just pleasure seeking. And I sit down and I weep, I who have been a witness to the beauty of the past. And I weep to see this death of emotions, this death in life, the image of death with which this stanza ends. The next stanza again takes us back to the world of myths, to the world of legends. In the first part, we have seen the image or the presence of T.S.Eliot, who is present throughout this part, that symbol of wisdom, universal vision, timelessness, permanence, longevity, and which has been taken from the Greek classical literature by Sophocles. T.S.Eliot is present in two plays, Oedipus and Antigone. The second part, a rat crept softly through the vegetation, dragging its slimy belly on the bank, while I was fishing in the dull canal on a winter evening round behind the gas house, musing upon the king my brother's wreck. Now this image of slime, of slush, of dullness, of ugliness, gas house, it is a reference to the legend of the Fisher King. Now, the Fisher King is an image or a presence from the Arthurian legends, the legends of the Holy Grail, where the Fisher King was wounded. The Fisher King was wounded, and this wound, it does not specify whether it was in his groin or his thigh, has rendered him impotent, so that he is unable to look back after his land, which has been devastated, which has become infertile. It refers to the impotence of the Fisher King also, which is a physical impotence, and it might be a spiritual sterility as well. And because he is unable to discharge his duties, his land has been devastated, it has turned lifeless, it has turned sterile, it has turned into a desert landscape. And the Fisher King, unable to discharge his duties, unable to perform his duties, spends his time fishing in a lake, spending his days in monotony, without any vision for the future, without any hope, in dullness and apathy. But the wound is also symbolic. It is not only a physical wound, but it is a spiritual wound as well. And the legend says that the wound was self-inflicted by a spear. So we can sort of enhance this reference to mean the wounds which mankind or human race has inflicted upon itself in the form of the war. Now, the Arthurian legends are about the search for the Holy Grail, which is the holy relic containing the blood of Jesus Christ. And the Arthurian legends are full of a heroic quest, and there is a mixture of romance and religion. Now, the Fisher King is waiting for his wound to be healed, and a knight in shining armor, and in this case it's Knight Percival, will come and ask the correct question, and then with the answer his wound will heal and the lands will be restored back to fertility. This is the myth of the Fisher King, which is present in the Arthurian legends, the legends of King Arthur and his round table and his knights and the search for Holy Grail. So this wound may be a physical wound or it is a moral and a spiritual wound. And once the wound is healed, it will be a rebirth or a regeneration of life once again in the Fisher King's lands, and he will be made whole again. So this is a symbol of something which will regenerate, something which will come back to life. That is life in death. So this is a temporary phase, and there is a possibility of rebirth. There is a certainty that life will be restored. And it is because of such passages that I like to believe that the Wasteland, though a very powerful statement on the disintegration of the modern civilization, is in fact not a statement of utter and complete despair or pessimism. Though the tone is pessimistic, there is a possibility of recovery, and such references to the legend of the Fisher King mark to a possibility. There is a lot of suffering, but this suffering is self-inflicted. It is something which mankind has brought upon himself, but the suffering can be eased out. The wound can heal. The wounds which mankind is suffering from can be healed from the proper belief and the proper answer. In the end, we do get answers and we do get a solution, and we are offered a possibility of regeneration. The reference is to the Fisher King, and this reference occurs in other parts also. And then there's a reference to the tempest once again. And it is because of these crisscrossing references, that is why the poem is not separate, or the epic is not separate, but it binds in a complete whole, because we have seen the references to the tempest in the other parts also. At the end of this analysis or this particular part, we will see what those references or what these echoes are, which come from other parts and which continue till the end. So these heroic quests which are present in the Arthurian legends, and also the fertility rituals of the land coming back to life again, when the knight Percival will come and heal the Fisher King's wounds. And in the modern day Wasteland, the wounds of the modern day mankind, the wounds of the modern day people of the modern civilization will also be healed with the right answers and with the proper solutions. These legends are from two works in particular, which T.S.Eliot makes reference to also, and which he says that he has been very influenced by. These two works are Jesse Wetson's quotation from Ritual to Romance, 1919, which was published in 1919, and The Golden Bough by James George Fraser, which was written in 1890. And these books describe the pagan fertility rituals which were in practice before the coming of Christianity. And as we know, T.S.Eliot makes a lot of reference to these fertility rituals, these pagan wisdom, this ancient wisdom, the belief system, also to Christian faith, to the world of classical belief, to medieval legends, and everything is connected to what he wants to express. So the legend of the Fisher King talks about the wound, self-inflicted wound, which will be healed and the lands will be restored to life and to fertility and to rejuvenation once again. Now the line which says, musing upon the king my brother's wreck, this is an obvious reference to the tempest which has occurred before also, and on the king my father's death before him. The lines are from, or the references to the tempest. Then the next part of this stanza talks about the ugliness of life, the bodies naked on low damp ground and bones cast in little low dry garret, rattled by the rat's foot only year to year. And this image of dried bones, rat's feet scurrying on slimy, muddy ground is an image which has been made in other parts also. And then suddenly, at the end of this stanza, a picture of the sordid relationships of the modern day world, and the picture is of Mrs. Porter and Mr. Sweeney and their life, and also the fact that they are performing rituals with like washing their feet in soda water. It is just a commentary on their life and their the life which is pretty nondescript and pretty meaningless. Then we come to lines, the next stanza, which brings us back immediately to the very first part, the burial of the dead, the last part of the burial of the dead, when T.S.Eliot has talked about unreal city. Now these lines are: unreal city under the brown fog of a winter noon. The lines in the burial of the dead were unreal city under the brown fog of a winter morn. So the time is from morning to noon, but nothing has changed. Just preceding unreal city is a reference to the change of Philomel. And if we remember, the words jug, jug, jug had occurred in a game of chess when the song of the nightingale, when Philomel was transformed into a nightingale and filled the desert air with her inviolable voice, was clashed with the sound of jug, jug, the harsh sound of the modern day traffic. And these lines are twit, 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 jug, 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 jug. So rudely forced, Tyrio. So rudely forced, again a reference to Philomel's change and her violation at the hands of the evil king who had raped her and who had violated her and who had destroyed the sanctity of relationships. So this reference also takes us back to other parts with the repetition of the words jug, jug. And then in this stanza, unreal city of the modern day London, or it can be any city, the people living there, the damned souls, the cursed creatures, the doomed people, the modern day hell, and the picture of Mr. Eugenides and the Smyrna merchant, his sordid appearance, unshaven, and he making an appointment with another woman, it might be Mrs. Porter, it might be someone else, of spending a clandestine weekend at a suburban hotel. Again, a commentary on the immoral and the temporary relationships, the looseness of sexual morals and values, the absence of any commitment, the absence of any sanctity in modern day relationships. But the most prominent references here, which take us back to the other parts of the Wasteland, the first two parts, are the references to the unreal city, the references to the tempest, the references to the sound of jug, jug, and the transformation of Philomel. Now, the next part, which is a long stanza, or the next long stanza, is again a very, very powerful depiction of the modern day life, of the sordid quality of life, of the emptiness, of the meaninglessness, of the routine, of the monotony, of the lack of enthusiasm, the lack of energy, the lack of vitality, the simple hopelessness of modern day existence. And these lines come immediately after the expression of the immoral suggestion or the immoral idea of two people who are not married just having a temporary weekend together. So this long stanza gives us a very vivid picture, taking a young typist as a representation of the modern young generation. What is their life like? Where has the heroism gone? Why is their life so without any beauty, without any aesthetic quality to it? This is again a curse of the modern day civilization, the modern day world, the urbanization, the life in big cities, the mechanical existence where people are living in a rat race. People do not have anything to look forward to, no companionship. It is a lonely life. And the poet, or T.S.Eliot is the omnipotent narrator and the spectator, talks about a young typist. This young typist might be anyone. She is a young woman, but there seems to be no youth or no vitality in her. She seems like a person who is totally disinterested, apathetic, without any enthusiasm, without anything to look forward to. And the irony is very obvious when the words violet, which is a color of romance, of significance, of possibilities, of beauty, which is an enchanting color, which signifies that magical moment of late evening when the day is drawing to a close and the sky and the horizons are full of tantalizing colors and shades. It also, that late evening also is synonymous with homecoming. Homecoming, which is a time of reunion, which is a time when people feel joy and feel happiness at being reunited with their loved ones, coming back to loved homes, coming back to their own spaces, coming back to comfortable and cozy homes. But what is the life of the modern day young generation like? What does violet hour mean to them? Is it like the ships coming home to harbor? This is again a very romantic image which is present in literature of the ships returning back to harbor after long voyages across the sea. It is synonymous with homecoming, with a feeling of peace, tranquility, happiness, joy, and reunion. But in the long passage, the life of the typist is described as something abject. The human engine, the human or the person is described as an engine because the life of a modern person is centered around the office and the office table. And the violet hour just means a release from that office hour. But does that release bring any happiness? There's tiredness, there's exhaustion, there's the coming back to a lonely, tiny, cramped room where there is nothing, which is unkempt, which is untidy because the young girl did not have time to clear her room. What does she come back home to? She has no companionship. She does not have the energy to cook. She lays out her food in tins, that is the tinned food. Again, a sordid image that she eats her food which comes out of tins. Her room is in a very tiny, in a building which is obviously not very upmarket because she cannot afford more. And her room is tiny and it is untidy, it is unkempt. The morning things are still lying on the dining table. She did not have time to clear them. It's grimy. It is not very clean. And she comes back to this lonely room all by herself. So I'll just read the lines. At the violet hour, when the eyes and back turn upward from the desk, when the human engine, the emphasis in the human engine, the engine with the life which has become mechanical, feelingless, waits like a taxi throbbing waiting. I, T.S.Eliot, though blind, throbbing between two lives, old man with wrinkled female breasts, can see. At the violet hour, the evening hour that arrives, homeward and brings the sailor home from sea, the typist home at tea time, where clears her breakfast, lights her stove, and lays out food in tins. So, the T.S.Eliot, who's a witness to this debasement, speaks in sorrowful tones. How she comes back tired, alone, lonely, clears the breakfast things which are still lying on the table, lights a stove and warms the food in tins. So this is the quality of her life. And T.S.Eliot, I, who is throbbing between two lives, neither man nor woman, and T.S.Eliot is supposed to be blind, but at the same time, T.S.Eliot is gifted with a panoramic vision and ability to look into the past, the present, and the future. So T.S.Eliot says, I see her now, and I know what is going to happen next. And T.S.Eliot, old man with wrinkled dugs. Like I said, T.S.Eliot is timeless, and T.S.Eliot is neither man nor woman, because T.S.Eliot has female breasts. Wrinkled dugs means age, withered, at the same time blind. T.S.Eliot is an anomaly, blind but able to see the past, present, and the future. And the rest of the stanza again depicts in great detail another sordid aspect of the young typist's life, who is a representation of the modern day or the modern generation. Her expected guest is another young man, another nondescript man working at a low-paying job, but having the bluster and the attitude and the swagger of someone important. He has come there. There's no feeling between them two. He has just come because he's compelled with his sexual desire. He comes to seduce her. He comes to get what she wants. And the typist is so disinterested, and she's so apathetic. She's so lost she's so indifferent. She hardly seems to care. This is again a very sad state of affairs. It is tragic that these young people who have descended to this level, and this young man, he gets what he wants. She is unresponsive, but he is barely, there is no real bonding or communication between them. He just wants a body. She gives it to him without protesting. She hardly cares. And she is beyond caring. She is totally indifferent. And like I said, this points out to when the young generation is like this, what is the future of mankind? And this is the tragic state of affairs, and it is very, very sad. And T.S.Eliot mourns at this loss of feeling and emotion, and what should have been something beautiful turning into something so sordid and almost unpleasant, because the total absence or the total lack of any kind of feeling is very, very clear. And the last part, again, T.S.Eliot speaks referring to himself or referring to his own feelings. And I, T.S.Eliot, have forsuffered all, enacted on this same divan or bed. I who have sat by Thebes below the wall and walked among the lowest of the dead, bestow one final patronizing kiss and gropes his way, finding the stairs unlit. And T.S.Eliot mourns, T.S.Eliot laments, T.S.Eliot says that I see and I suffer. This vision which I have, this age, this ancient age, which is like a curse, makes me suffer every time I see it. The lack of emotion, the apathy, the abject indifference, the sordid exchange between the young typist and the young man, the base quality of their life, which is the destiny or which is the sad reality of the young generation. I, who have seen the beauty of the past by the walls of the Thebes in the ancient times, I have seen what human feelings meant and the beauty and the aesthetics and the power of emotions. And now to see this complete deterioration, this animal-like relationships, this lack of interest, this lack of energy, this lack of motivation, this lack of feeling makes me feel sorrowful. I mourn, I lament. And then the stanza ends with again coming back to the nondescript young man and the description of the unlit stairs, which points out to the dreary living conditions in the modern day hell, the unreal cities, the metropolitan cities, the urban nightmares. So this picture of the young typist is very significant. It is very powerful. It is very vividly depicted. The irony in the contrast between the violet hour of the homecomings in the past and the present, the lack of companionship, the loneliness, the sordid existence of the young typist, of the young man who represent the modern generation is extremely tragic. So T.S.Eliot, the omnipotent voice, talks about the past, the walls of Thebes, the waters of Lehman, and the irony of the present day situation of the slimy banks, of the leafless trees, of the muddy banks of the river Thames, which moves sluggishly. And it is again a very powerful commentary on the deterioration of the modern life. But interspersed with it is the legend of the Fisher King, which tells us about the possibility of regeneration. When the Fisher King's wound, the self-inflicted wound, was healed by the knight Percival, and this possibility was in the form of a question with a correct answer. And we will see how it ties up till the end when we find that there is a possibility of regeneration from this modern wasteland. This scene of the young typist merges into another scene of a woman in upper class surroundings, not in the grimy, sordid surroundings of the typist and a cramped room and an untidy space and her job, the office hours, coming back home, but a woman in different surroundings and upper classes surroundings, but in the same situation where she is indifferent to her departed lover and her feelings are exactly those of the young typist. Well, now that's done and I'm glad it's over. When lovely woman stoops to folly and paces about her room again alone, she smooths her hair with automatic hand and puts a record on the gramophone. Here the sound of is a song from The Vicar of Wakefield by Oliver Goldsmith. The Vicar of Wakefield is a novel of the mid or the late 18th century, and this song is from this is a reference to that novel, The Vicar of Wakefield. The depiction is of a woman in upper class surroundings, but the emotions are the same, that of indifference and that of relief at the idea of the departed lover, on the novel The Vicar of Wakefield. That is T.S.Eliot's notes which he makes a reference to this passage. Now, the next stanza there's again a change of scene. This change of scene it brings us to London, once more back to the present. But the scene is of a memory, it depicts a memory of a time of romance, of beauty, of aesthetics, because the lines with which the stanza open is, "The music crept by me upon the waters." This line is from The Tempest. And with the reference to Tempest, we are back in a world of romance. But before we enter that world of romance, again the reference is in the third line of this stanza, which brings us back to the unreal city. And the lines are, "Oh, city, city, I can sometimes hear." And this consciousness of this city, I can sometimes hear, beside a public bar in Lower Thames Street, the pleasant whining of a mandolin. And in the city, the memory, which is a mere, in the words of T.S.Eliot, the memory is omnipresent. The memory or the modern day sounds of the horns and the traffic, they sort of disappear and change into a world of romance in the past, of the sound of mandolin, of music, of this same space which was full of beauty, where fishmen lounge at noon, where the walls of Magnus Martyr hold inexplicable splendor of Ionian white and gold. This is how this first passage ends from lines 265. On line 265, the rest of the part is in disjointed lines, but the first part, which ends at line 265, beginning from lines 173, altogether this part contains 137 lines, is dense and it is in long passages. But after this short stanza, which ends on lines 265, there is a total change of construction, where the lines are uneven and disjointed and move with a different pace. Now this stanza, with this music crept by me upon the waters, the line from Tempest, or the reference to Tempest, again brings the reader back, or changes the landscape into a world of romance and beauty, where the walls on the streets of Lower Thames, by the River Thames, were full of sound of music, sound of mandolin, and they were the beautiful, romantic, Ionian white and gold colors. It was a world of beauty, it was a world of perfection, it was a world which was in the past. So the past and the present and legends and myths and reality keep on merging and mixing and changing. It is rather like a movement of a kaleidoscope which seems to rotate, highlight, change, and shapes, throws shadows, highlights some things, and altogether it creates an ever-changing effect. So after lines 265, the construction of the poem changes till the end. The first part, the river sweats, oil and tar, the barges drift with the burning tile, till we la la, are of the grime and the pollution and the filth and the absence of beauty, which comes as a contrast to the preceding stanza, where the walls of Ionian white and gold and fishmen and romantic pictures and music of mandolin contrasts with the modern movement of the river, which sweats, oil and tar, the barges drift, the sails are red, and the logs drift, and the river moves sluggishly, and then there are words of a tune which again transform the scene into that world of beauty, that world of loveliness, that world of romance, where on the same river, which now sweats oil and tar, was a time in the past when Elizabeth and Leicester, in that world of romance, sailed on this river, which was beautiful, with swift waters, rippled. The wind carried their lovely boats, where the oars moved in unison with a rhythm. The images or the use of words, gilded shell, red and gold, the brisk swell, rippled both shores, southwest wind carried downstream the peal of bells, white towers, wee-la-la, wee-la-la. So wee-la-la in the wee-la-la, which appears once after the description of the grime of the river Thames, and wee-la-la, which encompasses the end. It creates a picture of beauty, of loveliness, of romance, of a time of emotion and passion and loveliness, which contrasts with the first part, where the modern day river Thames, it was the same river in the past, but at that time it was a place of gilded shell, white and gold, red and gold, and brisk swell. Now the river moves sluggishly with oil and tar, and logs, drifting logs, and a heavy movement. So this stanza also shows a contrast. Now, the last part of this long section of the Wasteland, the longest section, talk about or bring us back to the modern day scene, and they talk about the ugliness of modern life, not only the ugliness, but a sense of suffering and people who are suffering, the suffering souls. Trams and dusty streets, Highbury bore me, Richmond and Kew undid me. By Richmond I raised my knees, supine on the floor of a narrow canoe. My feet are at Moorgate and my heart under my feet. After the event he wept, he promised a new start. I made no answer, what should I resent? And here the words seem to be those of suffering souls, of some kind of repentance, some kind of regret, and of pain. On Margate sands, I can connect nothing with nothing, the broken fingernails of dirty hands, my people, humble people who expect nothing. Lala. Margate is a place, it refers to a sanatorium, and T.S.Eliot himself had suffered from some nervous breakdown where he had spent some time. And here the reference is to that emotional disturbance, to that sense of disintegration, that mental breakdown, that suffering, that sense of emptiness, that emotional void, which is the curse of the modern mankind, the modern day world. And then the last part, to Carthage then I came, burning, burning, burning. O Lord, thou pluckest me out. O Lord, thou pluckest burning. Here, T.S.Eliot in his notes says that he has made a reference to St. Augustine's Confessions, that great saint, Christian saint, and also to Buddhist philosophy. Both these belief systems are ascetic. And Carthage is a reference to a biblical landscape, and burning signifies suffering, purgation, penance, and a desire for salvation. As T.S.Eliot says, he has made the reference to both Buddhist philosophy and St. Augustine's Confessions, and this is the idea with which this long section ends, that of suffering, that of penance, that of purgation, that of salvation, that of a desire for purification, that burning of desire, that sense of salvation, that kind of catharsis which can come only with kind of suffering, which is a very ascetic belief in Christianity as well as Buddhism and other religions, that suffering and penance, they lead to salvation. So in this part, with the presence of T.S.Eliot, the omnipotent presence, the T.S.'s omnipotent vision, that universal vision, T.S.Eliot's universality, T.S.Eliot's sexlessness, because there are no boundaries. He is neither man nor woman, and like I said, there are his character or T.S.'s image brings us to or reminds us of many other such images like Methuselah, like Bhishma Pitama, of timelessness, of ancient age, of being a witness to racial history, or being a witness to centuries of human history. And this entire fire sermon begins with talking about the debasement of the modern world in the voice of T.S.Eliot, who moans and laments, the legend of the Fisher King, the possibility of the healing of the wounds and regeneration, the references, constant references to the tempest, the references to the unreal city and city, the picture, the long stanza talking about the young typist and the modern day typist of the modern generation with their lack of values and lack of enthusiasm, merging into the image of the woman from The Vicar of Wakefield, that 18th century novel, and then the contrasting scenes of beauty in the past and debasement in the present, beginning with the reference to the tempest, the sound of music, the lovely music of the mandolin, then the contrast between the modern day Thames and the Thames of the past, with its beauty, with its romance, with its magic, with its people like Elizabeth and Leicester sailing on the brisk swell, while the modern river moves sluggishly and heavily with oil and tar, and then ending with the picture of modern day suffering in the world of trams and dusty street, the feeling of regret, the feeling of emptiness, the feeling of being on the edge of nervous breakdown, the idea of suffering, salvation, penance, purification, a kind of purgation of desire, a reference to St. Augustine's Confessions and also to Buddhist philosophy. Now, in this part, there are a lot of echoes from the other parts as well. And it is important to emphasize those echoes because, like I said, they draw these parallels, are conscious parallels, which the poet has made as a deliberate poetic device to create the uniformity in all experience and also to give a kind of coherence to this long epic, which is so full of quotation broken images, so full of different pictures, half complete, some in detail like the picture of the typist and her routine, some half formed, some nameless, voiceless experiences, some voices drifting out of the wilderness. And it is important to emphasize on these crisscrossing echoes to see how they do create a pattern in this epic. So we can see they are very obvious, like in the Burial of the Dead. And not only that, we can also see that the images also seem to merge into each other. Like Stetson in the end of the Burial of the Dead can be the Phoenician sailor who was drowned, which Madame Sosostris talks about. Death by water can be a reference to the Tempest. There's a constant reference to water because water is a very important symbol of life. There's a reference to fertility rituals. There's a reference to the world of myths, the world of legends, medieval legends, ancient classical literature, the drowned Phoenician sailor, and then, of course, echoes from Shakespeare's plays. Like there are words or lines which occur and reoccur. In the Burial of the Dead, lines 47 talk about the drowned Phoenician sailor. Lines 48 talk about, or they say, those are pearls that were his eyes. Look. Exactly these lines appear in A Game of Chess, that is the second part, lines 125. Those are pearls that were his eyes. So the same lines, the same echo, the same thought, the same reference. Death by water is repeated again and again. Death by water is also a reference to the Tempest. The death by water, fear death by water, is expressed in lines 55 in the Burial of the Dead. And the reference to Tempest occurs in the Burial of the Dead in A Game of Chess, describing the pearls that were his eyes look, and also death by water. And also in the Fire Sermon, lines 191, musing upon the king my brother's wreck, a direct reference to the Tempest, and on the king my father's death before him, lines 191 and 192. Again, line 257, the music crept by me upon the waters. All these are references to the Tempest. Another reference is, another constant reference is to the rat's alley, to a blind alley, to a place which is closed, which is a dead end, which does not seem to have a way of escape. An image of a dead end, of stagnation, of no possibility, no route. The words Rat's Alley appear in the second part, A Game of Chess, in lines 115, where the poet says, or the words, or the speaker says, I think we are in Rat's Alley. And in 116, where the dead men lost their bones. That image of a dead end, a place where it's desolate, which is lonely, and where the dead men have lost their bones, where there is no remnant. Even the dead men have lost their bones. In the Fire Sermon, exactly the same image appears in 194 and lines 194 and 195. Bones cast in a little low dry garret, rattled by the rat's foot only, year to year. So we see the constant cross-referencing, and it is, like I said, deliberate. It is designed, it is a device, it is a poetic method by the poet to bind or to create these references from one part to another. The rape of Philomel and her transformation is present, of course, in the first stanza, the end of the long stanza, in A Game of Chess, where the song of the nightingale changes into jug jug of the ugly sound of the modern day traffic, jug jug to dirty ears. In the Fire Sermon, that is in line 103. In the Fire Sermon, the lines or the same words, the same harsh sounds, or the same reference to the change of Philomel appears in lines 204, 205 and 206, where the lines go jug 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 jug. So rudely forced, Tyrio. Rudely forced is an obvious allusion to Philomel's change by the barbarous king, by the cruel and the king who raped her and who cut off her tongue and who violated her. And then the very powerful image of the unreal city, which is very clear and which comes in the last part also, which depicts the modern world as nightmarish, where the modern people are doomed to, or they are condemned to live. Unreal City appears in the very first part in lines 60 and 61. Unreal City under the brown fog of a winter morn. This occurs again in the fire sermon, where it changes into Unreal City under the brown fog of a winter noon, lines 207 and 208. In the Burial of the Dead, the lines are 60 and 61. In A Game of Chess, the same lines, though the time is from morn to noon, but nothing has changed. It is still grey, it is still nightmarish, it is still a modern day hell. Lines 207 and 208, and again a reference to city, city in lines 259. So these constant echoes or these crisscrossing references cannot be missed, and it is quite clear that they are aimed at creating an uniformity in this chaotic design, which is so dense and which is complex and which is full of references to the world of myths, to the world of legends, to Christianity, to classical literature, to ancient wisdom, to Shakespearean drama, and of course pictures of the modern day world, the world of dirty years, and in this part, the last part, the broken fingernails of dirty hands. The use of the word dirty, jug to dirty ears in A Game of Chess, and in the last part of a fire sermon, the broken fingernails of dirty hands. The image of the expression of the lack of beauty and the lack of coherence in the modern day world. So these three parts, if we analyze them closely and we emphasize on the cross currents of references, the echoes, the constant coming back and forth, the movement, we can discern a very obvious pattern. And as we slowly move forward, in this part in particular, the reference to the Fisher King and the Fisher King's rejuvenation and revival of his arid, dry, lifeless lands into fertility once again is very significant. It points out to a possibility, and the constant emphasis on water as being a source of life is also closely connected with the pagan rituals, the fertility rituals, to which T.S.Eliot has made a reference as to the works to which he has gone back again and again to understand these pagan rituals, and these two works which he makes a constant reference to are, like I mentioned, Jessie Weston's quotation from Ritual to Romance, published in 1919, and The Golden Bough by James George Frazer, 1890, and these describe the pre-Christian pagan rituals. And this part in particular, it speaks, or the narrator, the spectator, is Tiasias, and the reference to the legions, the Arthurian legions of the Fisher King is very, very significant. And I think it points out to the possibility of a solution, which the poet gives us at the close of his great epic. Thank you.